Iain is a recent graduate of architecture, currently working in a multidisciplinary design practice, HASSELL. Iain completed his Masters of Architecture at Curtin University in 2014 with his highly provocative thesis titled Alive. Iain's thesis puts forth a theory about measuring a building on its capacity to be alive, and architecture in terms of its degree of aliveness. The ultimate goal of his thesis is to present a new way of designing and measuring our buildings based on the question of life, notions around its sophistication and intelligence. So please welcome Iain, who will be asking the question, can buildings be alive?
So where's the USB port? This may take a while. Alright. So, where to begin? If you're completely cooked after this, I won't be surprised. So, I started out like any first year, being very interested in generating forms, but not being devoid of just generating forms for the sake of forms, but looking at the pragmatics of it, trying to making forms arriving at intelligent solutions. The background of my research began with a phenomenon which preoccupied me for probably my entire architectural life, which was something I coined implied movement, which is often used, which means basically an element or a part of a building that looks or feels as if it's moving or alive. So you're projected into a space where it looks like it has an element of moving, but it's not actually moving. Architects that commonly do this are architects like Zaha did. You have emergent, asymptote, and morphosis. Now, what this resulted in is a card set analysis that I did at the HASSELL studios, trying to extrapolate these different qualities of these buildings and try and figure out what is it that actually makes these buildings feel alive? What are they gesturing? What are these gestural forms? So this resulted in this analysis of findings of just different mechanics that these architects have just stumbled upon on how to actually create these visual illusions and this impression of life in their structures. So what really captured me about this was the quality of life in these buildings, the energy around these buildings. What makes these buildings feel alive? What makes them come to life? How can architecture be more alive? How can we lead architecture towards aliveness? What makes it so different than everything else we've done? So this was really a launching pad for me into my 4.5 years investigation, and just to find out if and how you could make a building more alive. Now I'd like to show you a little teaser trailer of what was to come for my thesis supervisors at the time. Personal joke between me and my thesis guys with that one. Now, the quote says, "It's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but the ones most responsive to change," by Charles Darwin. That was kind of a driver for the project. What that led me to question is, what does it mean to be alive? There's nothing more complex and sophisticated than a system or the word that is alive. It speaks of persona, DNA, complexity of organisms. It basically encompasses all the questions of life, and it is a premise and a quest to look at how buildings can be considered more alive. It asks the question, how alive is that building? Just if you were to say, is how restrained or how contextualized is that building? This question led me on a path of investigation, scoping different projects, different architects, different elements throughout history, trying to find what had occurred in the past to lead to this time of form of architectural expression of implied movement. But what it led me to realise is architecture is both art and science, qualitative as well as quantitative. And the scope became very broad. I started to look at systems of life, technology, advancements in technology, I just said that, didn't I? Implied movement, all these different factors that started to come together. And it was about scoping these technologies and advancements to build a narrative around how a building could be considered more alive. What is its degree of aliveness? Due to the complexity involved in the word alive, I had to narrow it down to a bunch of particular aspects to intensify my study. So I had to look at particular systems of life in which I could amalgamate technology to hybridize living systems. And this was basically a blueprint of what my building and my project, or building organism, fine line, was going to turn out to be. So I focused on 5 or 6 key systems: the immune system, the brain, the skin, the skeletal system, and what else did I do? It's been a while since I spoke about this. Oh, and the nervous system. So before I delve into the complexity of this, I'll first explain why science is important. So architecture has basically become adoptive rather than innovative. And as Lars Sparrowbrook, a professor and eventually chair of the Georgia Institute of Technology, quotes, architecture tends to be at the low end of science and worse, at the low end of technology. Now, why is science important, you might ask? Science has evolved us. Science has changed us. Science has built the foundation in which man has developed itself. Science systems such as biomimicry, bioengineering, engineering, civil engineering, all these different scientific fields, quantum science, artificial intelligence. Basically, all of them are the innovators and progressors of humanity, yet architecture really doesn't invest in the other disciplines at all, apart from the minor few. So the research in the sciences allowed me to submit a proposition that looks inwards as well as outwards, borrowing and leveraging, harnessing intelligence from nature and science, taking advantage of the best technologies on offer and intellect to provide a highly responsive and adaptable design solution. As it is without doubt, architecture needs to be more adaptive and responsive to its natural environment. So this brought me to, I needed to find a location to test the technologies and natural systems. And it needed to be a showpiece. It needed to be a piece to awaken the city. It needed to be large scale, large impact, bring everyone towards it, bring the masses, bring the world to it, really champion this idea of a living building. It needed to awaken the city. And this really bring about the importance of the ecologies. That's it, sitting prominently in the Swan River. Couldn't get more in your face than that, I don't think. So the importance of ecologies came to mind because there are all these different systems in life, and all of them have different adaptations to different ecologies: land, water, sky, under the ground, all different types of ecologies. So I tried to scope to find the best location to actually test all of these ecologies, and the Swan River was found to be the best site. One, due to having the advantage of water, land, theoretically, and sky ecologies to test the systems, as well as the Swan River's multiple environmental issues in terms of its rapid degeneration, which presented a unique opportunity to rejuvenate the Swan River. So now I'd like to cite some of the, well, also what I forgot to mention is the ecologies also allowed me to create my own external ecology as well as an internal ecology, which was inside the structure. So I had these two ecologies, the organism's ecology, such as your own body diaphragm has its own ecology, and the external ecology to your own body now. So now, oh no. Did not like that, did it? Let's copy this to desktop, maybe that'll be better. Yeah, bear with me. It was a big thesis. If you don't want to turn as grey as me, stay away from Qua. I love you, Qua. Trust me to get all the glitches. So, speaking of the 5 systems, I'd now like to talk about briefly some of the technologies that were applied. I can't cover them all because it's just too much, but I'll briefly touch on some of the main aspects of each of the systems. Oh my God. Is it? It just doesn't. PowerPoint, why do you fail me? See, this is why you don't like technology. Let's just go past that slide. Alright, so one of the first system, which was the primary system of the entire structure, was the skin system of the structure. So what that was based on was a technology developed by BMW called, is it going to work? Come on. What the hell? Huh? I'll try one last time. Jeez. Hopefully this wouldn't happen to the building. Alright, PowerPoint's carked it. So this is based on a technology by BMW that they created called... You know what? I'm just going to wing it. Because it doesn't seem to like me. Oh, yes. There's promise. It's not on the board, so I'll explain it. Basically, BMW Gina was a car that had a polymer lycra skin that stretched over an endoskeleton, which allowed the actual structure to move and adapt and have deformations on the structure. So, for instance, it could open its doors and it was seen, and it would act like your skin. So, the whole car acted as if it had a skin membrane laid over it and it could react differently to any movement. Its eyes would open, it would have its bones underneath would stretch, it would all work.
Just don't like you.
Don't go on the video slot. Did it crash? Yep. Alright. So what this led me to was a technology called electroactive polymers, which is a plastic-based polymer which acts like muscles or skin of the human body. Here we go. Wait. So this is where it all started. So electroactive polymers basically can have up to 380% strain of deformations on themselves. And this constituted for the main skinning of the entire structure, which allowed the internal skeleton to be able to move and adapt to environmental conditions just like your own body would, so that the deformations wouldn't pose any problems to the facade of the structure. The skin was separated into several layers just like your own skin. So you got the dermis, the hypodermis, the melatonin, all these different layers of your skin. And I adapted the skin to... Can you guys hear me with that? Yeah. All right.
This will be Alex as well.
Oh, okay. So... This is going to be the worst. All right. So these diagrams below here, which would have been up there, basically it's separated into multiple layers of skin just like the human body. So I adapted the systems of how the human body's skin reacts to different environmental conditions using technology that we have today. So bringing science back to architecture. So for instance, in the terms of melatonin, it uses a technology called thermochromatic polymers, which basically reacts to heat sensitivity of UV rays light, changing the transparency, the transmittance, the reflectance of the actual material. So as the light hits it, it will slowly tint itself according to whatever the UV exposure is, acting as the melatonin. It also has an information interface, which is made by Displax, which is 1 millimeter thick and can be applied to any surface, which will allow the structure to display information, allow the user to interact with the structure, and the entire skin is cast in this. The reason this is important because it acts in the information ecology of the structure, which basically means that this structure is a massive testbed of science. That's its whole purpose. It has all the different science fields based within it, and they all work on the structure as a living testbed. So each is working for the benefit and applying it to the structure. Now, the way this is done is through technology called IBM Watson, which is a cognitive technology developed by IBM, which actually learns and forms hypothesis, and it actually learns off of its own users. So if it makes a mistake, it'll learn from that mistake. So for instance, they put it in a challenge of Jeopardy against the world's top players, and it beat all of them without being even connected to the internet, purely by learning off its own answers. And also, the cancer researchers said to it, try and find a protein for this cancer that would potentially turn it off. It came back, it went through 70,000 peer-reviewed articles and formed a hypothesis as to why it was the best article, and it did it in a few seconds. It takes a researcher 1 year to even find one. So it's a 600% increase. So all this technology is thought a little bit further ahead and saying, what if we brought that into architecture? What if we brought this different type of architecture, this different scientific field is doing, and amalgamate it to the systems and hybridize it to living systems at the same time? So as these scientists are working on the structure and different technologies, IBM Watson is scanning the surround of its skin and every other element of its being, and analysing information, working out different ways of actually adapting to these different situations, similar to your own body. So as this happens, it will put forward more iterations of what would be a better choice for the skin or the skeleton or another element of the actual body of the structure. This in turn acts as the immune system. So it's constantly evolving, constantly growing, constantly changing. So you're really thinking to yourself, how the hell does it change without pulling the whole structure down? So it also has a skeleton in it, but it's a highly ductile skeleton. It's an exoskeleton and an endoskeleton hybridized together. So if the endoskeleton needs to be swapped out, the exoskeleton will hold it up. If the exoskeleton needs to be removed, the endoskeleton will hold it up. And what this allows it to do is it constantly be interchanged. It's constantly changing. It will grow. It will change. Now you're wondering how it responds to things. That's also another technology called eSkin, which they're looking at using for prosthetics for amputees, so they can actually feel again through their technology. And it's basically another 1 mil thin layer that stretches over the skin, and you can feel, and it has nerve responses. Now, if this is all over the building, and there's this information rushing around, which is explained by this image here. So these are the transport tubes and the runners of information from land to the actual structure. So it's very much like the nervous system. It draws in information from these polymer skin, which is laced with all these different technologies. And you can interact with it. You can see what's happening. You can ask what's in the question. It will respond. There's a video on here which would have showed how it actually works in real time. And you can actually interact with it, and it constantly learns from its interactions. Now I've completely lost my train of thought. Now the structure also incorporates the skeletal system of the human body, because it's probably the most intricate and advanced system in the entire body, as it has one column through the center of it which holds up your entire body. It guards your entire nervous system through its spinal canal. It offsets the weight. It's an amazing piece of natural engineering, and I put that within the structure, and there's two, so that the structure can actually react to the environment around it. Instead of being a brace against everything, it can actually react to wind loads, it can move, it can change its form, it can adapt to whatever it needs to do. So nothing in the structure is really set. It's constantly changing, and it's not fixed, and it's really driven by science and architecture brought together. Now, it's not just all about science, it's also a wonderful human-oriented environment. So it's massive, it's large scale. And if you're wondering how that's built, it's off a technology called graphene, which is 300 times stronger than steel and weighs 1 cubic meter weighs at 0.77 milligrams. So Jack here could pick up a whole sheet the size of this room if you wanted to, and it'd be stronger than steel. So that's how the size is built. But you imagine coming in through the tubes and this information's flying around you and you can see what's going on, all these technologies being advanced, real-time information from different countries and different hubs like this, and you enter into a massive hall that looks like the ribbed diaphragm of an actual creature and you walk through it. So you're experiencing all of these different, because architecture is essentially about space. That's what we do as space engineers, really. We make feelings, but we've forgotten about the scientific approach, which is what will bring it back into it, and nature as a reference for sometimes perfect design. So we're rejuvenating the Swan River ecology, giving that back, having another experience underwater. You can come swimming, you can come by ship to the actual structure. You've got an internal ecology, which is entirely different to the external ecology of the structure. So all these different sciences and all these adaptations of nature are being brought back into it. And what the thesis really puts forward is we need to look at alive. We need to look at how buildings can be considered more alive. And it really, the contribution it puts forward to the dissertation is we need to look at alive in terms of the sense of its sophistication and its intelligence, breaking it down into its parts and looking how can we unite science and architecture back together and bring these systems of life back into the field to further enhance our profession. And it's really asking the question as well as, I lost my train of thought. Measuring buildings in terms of their aliveness. So I'm not saying the building is alive, I'm saying how alive is that building. A different way of measuring architecture, just the same as how poetic, how tectonic, all those different words we've been playing with this whole time being this course. I'm adding another one to the list, which is how alive, because if you're more alive, you're more responsive, you're more adapt, you're more accustomed to the economies of scale, experience, reaction. You're accustomed to all these things. So as we have this constant battle with the environment and adaptive, responsive buildings, how alive is it? Because everything in nature is adaptive and responsive to everything that is within its ecology. So maybe architecture should start applying that to what we do now. And the greatest leaders don't really give answers. For this is no way a resolved design. It's more of an armature platform. I'm just trying to bring the masses together around a notion and really push that idea to get architecture to think differently, push it to think differently.